This project started a number of years ago when I bought this book and had a crack at building this diorama here. And here you can see the finished 1/35th scale diorama, and it's pretty spectacular. So you've got the tanks there coming over the wall. Really quite cool. And yeah, basically I thought I would have a crack at doing a 1/72nd scale one, so a much smaller version. And a few years later, I'm looking at it thinking I can do so much better. And you can see that here. The tanks are just very drab. You know, there's really not a lot to them. There's no oil wash, no weathering of any kind. Same situation on the wall here. You can see that looks very fake. This figure here, I hadn't finished painting the MG42, so that looked unfinished. So what we did is we got the paint on this section here, and a really lovely squeak from the airbrush there, but you can see I'm just weathering that area there. Yeah, really need to clean out that airbrush. The other thing is where I did the plaster for the explosions. There was these little bits about. Now, I left them back in the day on the basis that, oh yeah, it could be chalk debris, and it just didn't look right. So this is me getting the tweezers and picking up all of that debris. That was the most fun part of this restoration. Now we turn to the night wash from Ammo, and this is going to be our friend throughout this diorama restoration. So the first thing I wanted to do, obviously, was to darken these areas and pick up the different sort of subtle tones in the craters. Obviously this wash, it dries and looks a little bit more subtle. You can almost see that in the first one I did there. But yeah, this is just picking up those details. And then we did the same thing on the wall. Like I say, it's the same wash, and we're just painting that wall just to create a bit of depth to it. Now it's sort of railway ballast, you know, from 00 gauge diorama accessories that is stuck to a piece of cardboard. And here we go, using the black wash again, this time on the figures. And again, little things like that that just enhance them. Over to the tanks now. So first thing I needed to do was dust them off. So I've got a soft brush, and I'm just giving that a bit of a dust. Then in a moment, I'll turn to the micro sole to soften the decals on the top. Et voila. So yeah, just softening that decal there, making sure that it properly conforms to the plastic. Same with that one there, and the markings on the side. Here's the difference between the two. So the one on the foreground has had the panel wash, and this is me doing that panel wash on the second one. Here's the figures after they've had their panel line wash, and look at the difference. And this is me painting the MG42 finally with the metallic matte black from Vallejo. This was a job that, as you can see, takes no time at all, and yet for some reason I just never got round to doing it. I then got the brass again from Vallejo, and we're painting the bullet belts. And then we're getting our old faithful PVA glue just to stick these figures back in their respective place. I think I nudged the camera arm there, so I was waiting for it to get back into focus and stop wobbling. But yeah, putting these figures back where they were originally. And already you can see the improvement in the diorama. This floor area here, the colour just looks that much better. And here I'm using the same metallic black, and I think that's the best colour for chipping tanks. Showing that bare metal that's coming through. And obviously if you want to go a step further, you can add rust details. But I think this really does give you the right colour. I also used it for the shovel, the sledgehammer and pickaxe head that was on the back of the Churchill. And what we're doing here, this is a khaki mix that's slightly lighter than the actual colour. And we're using Uncle Nightshift's technique of painting all the different rivets. And thankfully with the Churchill, you've got a load of those, so you can really bring that contrast out. And you can see this close-up image, we've got a much better contrast between the colours. It's a lot more interesting, it's a lot less drab than we were previously. And I mean, that looks a million times better, and you could almost call it done there. You can see we've got the wash on the tracks there. We've picked out some lighter areas. You've got the darker areas with the wash. It's just looking a lot more professional. But we have another step, airfield dust. All of the sort of roads, the earth, all of that that's going to collect in those track areas. And yeah, we can use Ammo's pigments like I'm doing here just to give us that extra weathered effect and really make these tanks pop. Now I'm turning to the furrowed field, which it just never quite worked. You can see, or at least you could, now you can see the sand that I tried to create that earth effect. But what I need is this terrain effect, earth effect, which I'm using here. I'm using a Q-tip or cotton bud with the cotton bit cut off so that I can follow the furrows. And I'm not too bothered about neatness here because it's a ploughed field. It's not going to be pristine perfect like it was with the corrugated cardboard that I'd used. This is just a dry brush effect on the stone wall that we already weathered earlier with the black wash. So this is an earthy, greeny sort of colour. So moss, earth, just general weathering. And it's just turning that wall into something that's a bit more realistic. I black based the field, so I basically sort of started again in terms of the colour. I had to because the terrain effect, as you can see, has got that sandy colour. So it needed a repaint, got the airbrush out, and we're starting with a black wash so that we can layer up the different shades of brown. And this is the first effect. So this is just the brown. I'm not spending a lot of time on precision here. It's purely an overall coverage. And then we get the paintbrush out. And again, we're going for kind of a dry brush effect and going across the top of those furrows so that we've got essentially 3 different shades being picked out. And then we are gluing the tanks back in position. And you can see how my hand is directly in front of the lens and you cannot see at all me gluing the tank. But what I'm doing there is putting PVA glue on the tracks, and you'll see that as it comes back into shot. Okay, maybe you won't, but that's me gluing that back in place. This was probably the next most fun part. That's individually gluing on each little bit of cabbage. So this is rough foliage, terrain stuff that again you get for railway models and general diorama work. And a lot of it was really quite clumpy and thick, so I've had to break that even more. And as you can see, I'm meticulously gluing these one by one onto the furrows. And it was totally worth doing this. These are those these are grasses that are like pre-stuck. I think they're brilliant. I've used them in some of the other diorama builds I've done, and of just adding a bit more interest to the diorama. But immediately this is looking a lot more professional. This is me sticking a back piece to the overall sides of the diorama. So here you can see how I got that elevation and those stepped effects. But what I didn't have was an all way around side. So that was the back piece, which we then varnished with a mahogany paint, and this is now the finished diorama, which in 1/72 scale I think looks a million times better. But I would love to know what you guys think in the comments below, and do think about subscribing. I'm going to shut up now and let you enjoy the beauty shots. Try taking this, baby.